Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to the next installment in my Team Up Review Rewind series. So this is a little bit of a weird entry because it's not necessarily a traditional team up, as the whole season was like an anniversary season with various cameos and references, but I think Legendary Battle is the closest to a proper team up. I will do some bonus episodes for the other little mini cameos, but this one's more so prioritizing acting as a finale for Super Mega Force, but as team-up elements. So as a result, it's going to be kind of a weird review because I'm going to be talking about the episode overall, but I'm going to try my best to hone in more so overall on the aspects of the team-up, you know, how it functions as a team-up in terms of grading it. But it's going to be impossible to not talk about the episode just as an episode. So, Super Mega Force and the finale and Mega Force and everything about it I think is just overhated. I totally understand people's disappointments in it, but I think when you look at this finale and the series overall, it's just the most okay thing that ever happened, and I feel that a lot of the hatred just comes from people's expectations, and I think it's understandable for them to have wanted more effort put into it, but I think people's expectations were way too high. And I feel like for me, when it comes to the hate this series and this episode gets, it just is like people get really mad at an unbuttered piece of bread that's just not flavorful, but there's like no reason to get so upset at it. I mean, just to quickly talk about this episode on its own, it's not that bad of an episode. It's actually kind of an entertaining episode with a lot of cool action happening, and I imagine the kids watching this as their Power Rangers were pretty excited about it because it's a pretty epic finale in a way. There's just not a lot of emotional investment to it for me because, you know, I wasn't that invested in the characters or story, but I was never overly mad at it. But it has some cool parts in it just as a finale. It's just kind of like the series itself is kind of there. It's like a checklist of things that make it okay, but there's not a lot of feeling behind it. But I don't think, you know, if you just put it in a bottle and don't think about fans' expectations, it's that bad overall. Now, as far as the team-up aspects, it's much more like cameos, because the Rangers are basically defeated near the beginning of the episode, and then, for whatever reason, the Empire is like, okay, we're gonna give you one night to just think about how bad things are gonna be. And then during that time frame before they launch their full invasion, we get to see some scenes of some veteran Rangers rescuing people. And that's probably the best moment in the episode. Like, regardless of everything else, I think they were really good scenes. It was cool to see the Rangers actually rescuing people. The sort of helmet overlay was cool. It was kind of inspired by what they did in Gokaiger, but I thought this one looked a little bit cooler. It was neat. It definitely raises questions about, like, how the Lost Galaxy Rangers get there. There was 3 of them there, and I just imagine they heard about the trouble and traveled there. And since there's been precedents for the Lost Galaxy Rangers traveling to Earth or to the Moon for other team-ups, it's not a huge bother, but it's definitely a little bit weird. But regardless, I really loved these scenes. I think they were really nice. I feel, again, in the context of the kids watching this, who probably weren't expecting, you know, a fan service season and had all these expectations, they probably just experienced all these old teams through the legendary changes, and then it was probably cool for them to get to see some of the faces behind it at the end. But again, regardless, these were some cool scenes, and, you know, there were some cool scenes throughout the episode for the Rangers as well as regards to legendary changes. I know one of the most controversial ones is the US footage of them doing 4 new powers along with Mighty Morphin Red, and people will often say, well, why did they do that? If they were going to do that, why not just film their own footage? Which I guess is my anthem for Power Rangers overall, is the idea that we're so reliant on someone else's work in, you know, modern times is stupid. But it's clear that after that they wanted to use the new powers footage, and so they just had mmpr Red in there so that they didn't have 5 new powers straight up. Again, I'm team new powers. It's obviously that they did it just so they could use the footage and be cheap and save money, but it incidentally expanded the universe in a small way, so I wasn't that upset about it, because the changes are a shallow aspect anyway, and for me, this subtly expanded the universe. I see why people are bothered by it, but I think it's something that's overblown, and it was really cool to see speaking of superficial, the footage looked really good. Our footage always looks cleaner, and so seeing all those suits with mmpr Red looked really good. I thought the escape moment with the In-Space Rangers was cool, and I think that the every weapon, every mode we got was kind of a cool line. And just to circle away from the team-up stuff just for a second, I think Troy had a couple of nice moments and nice inspirational speech moments in this. They're a little bit cheesy, but it just made me think that Troy probably is to kids watching this the same thing Jason was to, like, our generation. I mean, when you think about it, a lot about this era's characters from the Neo Saban era are just as wooden and one-dimensional as the mmpr characters. We just think they're better because we grew up with them, but Troy is not that different from Jason. But I thought he had some nice moments. Speaking of, in regards to anniversary elements, there's a couple moments throughout the episode where Troy references, like, the legendary Rangers put their trust in us with their powers, and it just, for me, it raises questions as to where the powers came from, and I feel like this episode would have been a perfect opportunity to address that. Like, maybe the Rangers say that they were always giving their powers to them as some sort of contingency plan or something, and I don't know. I think that would have been something cool to address. Not to mention, it would have been neat to expand more on Troy's vision than, I dreamt of this. The only other anniversary aspect is after the final battle with the big bad, is they have to deal with his leftover armory, and all of the other legendary Rangers show up, and I did like the scene of them all showing up. Again, calls into question where did their powers come back, but after we had stuff like Sentinel Knight and various other series where the Rangers' powers were back, it's not that hard to figure out just an explanation of why they got him back. And I did appreciate that they paid a little bit attention to detail of the fact that, like, Tommy wouldn't be with Zeo or the mmpr team or the Dino Thunder team specifically because he's kind of in all the camps. And I guess you could say that the Turbo Rangers were maybe the robot versions or something. But regardless, there was a little bit of attention to detail paid to it. It was a cool scene. I liked the music when they all walked up. And then you only have the returning Rangers be helmetless. I kind of wish some of the other returning Rangers had gotten rescue scenes, especially since this is the extended edition. Like, Damon and Corone basically, and I think Wes just got a scene where they're like nodding that they need to go help, but it would have been cool if they got a rescue scene. Mike and Emily got nothing. Like, they literally just stood there. They had no lines in this. They had no rescue scene. It would have been nice for them to at least have gotten one or the other. I kind of expected that in the extended edition, but we didn't get that either. But regardless of that, you can't expect them to get everybody back, and I didn't mind the scenes of the Legendary Rangers with the Megaforce team. I kind of liked the sort of encouraging passing of the torch scenes, and my favorite moment was obviously in the extended edition when Corone says, "I love being a Power Ranger," and they do an overlay of Astronema to her just like they did with the Rangers. It was a little stupid looking, but also a cool moment of acknowledging a unique point in Ranger history, and her saying, "I love being a Power Ranger," was also a nice character beat because there was backstory about how young Corone wanted to be a Power Ranger before she became Astronema. And for me, that's why I know this episode is super hated, but I like it way more than the recent Dino team-up. Like, it didn't have a lot to it, but for me, the rescue scenes and little moments like that had so much more meaning than the hollowness of the Dino team-up. But that's just me. And then, you know, they kind of just give their seal of approval and leave in a teleporting scene that kind of adapts to when the Sentai powers went off at the beginning of Gokaiger, and the series ends with him planting a sword in the end. He plants a sword in the end of the show, but he plants a sword in the ground. I wish there would have been a more epilogue for the Rangers. And something else I wanted to bring up before I forget it is, it always bothered me the way the final battle was structured. Like, you defeat the big boss first, and then the final big fight of the series with all the other Rangers is against leftover henchmen. I think they easily could have swapped those or integrated them where, like, the main villain Marvo is leading this army, and you have the big scene of them all morphing together, and then, you know, the big battle, and then you just show footage of the Legendary Rangers fighting the X-Borgs, and then you have the Megaforce Rangers split off to beat him. It just feels weird and anticlimactic that the reason the Legendary Rangers show up to help is to fight off a bunch of putties. I mean, I know there was a lot of them, but still, it's weird. So overall, I mean, again, I get the disappointment in this episode, but I think it's okay. It's like a basically epic-ish finale for the generation that watched this. It has some nice, meaningful cameos, but there definitely could have been more to it. Again, my expectations for the season were weird because I had zero expectations and desires for the anniversary aspect because I was exhausted at it at the time. But I understand why people are upset by it. But at least the ones they had felt meaningful to me. I think they could have integrated it to have the Legendary Rangers helping the current team more throughout the episode. But this is also a weird episode to review in this series because it's not necessarily meant to be a traditional team-up like the others. It's meant to be a finale with some cameos for the anniversary. But overall, I find it to be an okay episode that I like moments in, and I feel like I'm one of the few fans that doesn't have a seething hatred for it. But what did you guys think? What did you guys think of this episode? What do you guys think of the moments in it? Have you softened to it a little bit? Do you like it better than the Dino team-up? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.